Hello and welcome to an episode of Miniature Painting with the Jolly Good Giant, brought to you by MCM. Today I'm going to be painting up a Reaper Bones miniature of Gormaw, the giant worm. When you get your model, it's going to be either a gray plastic or a white plastic. This model, I believe, comes in 7 pieces. When you get it, you want to wash it with dish soap and warm water, pat it to dry, then start painting it up. This is an example of one that I painted already. The one I was going to paint for you today, I'd intended to paint similar to this, but then I decided to go a different way. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it off to the side here so I don't get any paint splatter on it. So to save time, I pre-painted a base coat onto this model. I left it in 2 parts so I can work on them individually and then put them together when I'm done. So some of the tools you're going to need before you get started painting is a 10-pack of Mod Podge detail brushes, a foam Mod Podge brush, a 1/4-inch flat brush, a small cup of water, and then a rag or a paper towel to clean up any messes. So I portioned out my paints that I'm going to use already. When I did that, I used a little bit of Mod Podge Ultra. It's intended as a sealer, but it also works to dilute the paint a little bit, make it smooth, not dilute, it makes it go on smoother and makes it more durable so it doesn't chip or crack as easily as it would otherwise. So let's get painting. There's 2 different styles of painting. There's dry brush and wet brush. I try to do a combination of both, but I mostly do dry brush. This is a 4-inch flat brush, not 4-inch, number 4 flat brush. I'm going to dip a little bit in the darkest color red that I have, wipe off some excess on this cardboard here, and then I'm going to start painting. I want to do fast, light strokes and just keep going like that. It's going to take me a few minutes to do this. Rather than dipping my brush in the paint again, I'm going to use up what I put on the cardboard there. So, and right there I went a little heavy, so what I'm going to do is dip my brush in the water. I'm going to pull a little bit of that off. I'm using my rag to pat it out too. And I'll give that area a minute to dry, and I'll go over it again, because it'll need it. I'm going to do alternating colors on this, black and red with some metallic highlights. Normally start to finish, painting a model like this can take anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. But doing some of the prep work beforehand really helped out. I'm just going to keep going like this. I actually have 4 shades of red that I'm going to go over on this, so I'm going to do 4 different coats. The base, normally when I do a base coat, I do it with black, or sometimes I'll use a darker color of the color that I'm going to use. I'll use the darkest color as the base coat. In this case, I decided to use a very dark brown, almost black brown. It's cocoa, actually, to give it a slightly different color texture. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing there. While that section dries, I'm going to move on to the next one here. It's okay if it's a little bit heavy, because remember, you're going to go over with 3 other shades of red, and it's going to create a blended sort of texture. Give it a little more depth, color depth. Lots of people use magnifying glasses or just magnifiers that you can wear on your face for painting. Personally, I feel like they just get in my way and they don't really help me, so I don't use them too often. So now I've got 2 sections done with the first shade of red already. Then I'm going to alternate. I'm going to skip over that because this one's going to be black, so I'm going to go to the next red, and I'll go to the other red on this side. Try to go against the grain when you can. Sometimes these models get a little tight and it's difficult to do that, especially with really tiny brushes. But it helps create, again, more of a texture effect. We can see in the cracks, see shadows in the cracks. I don't usually use washes or inks like a lot of people do with miniatures, because I feel like the dry brush technique really takes care of all that. So I've done all the sections that I'm going to do in red. I'm going to go back and double check the first one that I did to make sure I didn't miss any obvious spots that I want to be red. I have the red detail. So I'm going to check that right now. If you're just starting out with miniature painting, I would recommend using Reaper Bones or a similar modeling company that uses plastic miniatures or resin miniatures before you to decide, so you can see if you really like it, rather than going out and buying a bunch of metal miniatures, which cost 2 to 3 times as much. Yeah, if you drop one of these, it's probably not going to break, but if you drop a metal miniature, it's going to get dented or snap. And I remember I had a very small miniature that was pretty expensive, and I dropped it when my son distracted me, and it completely smashed its face, and there was no way to fix that. So when I teach my painting group, local painting group with the kids, I almost always use Bones models. Sometimes they bounce. The models, not the kids. In hindsight, I probably wouldn't use this particular shade of brown again as a base coat, because I feel like I'm painting a piece of chocolate right now. I'm almost done touching up the first base coat of red, then I'm going to move on to black while all the red dries. All right, so I've gone over that with the red. I'm going to close up my red paint, clean off my brush. I'm a big fan of number 2 and number 4 flat brushes, so if you watch any of my other videos, you'll see that. The next color I'm going to use is going to be just a solid black. Again, this paint also has had the Mod Podge added to it to give it the extra durability. I'm actually going to start with the underside first. It'll be tough for you to see me painting this because of the angle of the model. So just to give you an idea on cost here, this is a $30 model made out of Bones. They don't even make it out of metal because the cost would be so excessive if it were made out of metal because it's so large. So that's another upside to working with Bones material, which is a type of PVC resin, PVC plastic, because create much larger models for a more cost-efficient price. I chose Gorma to paint today because even though he's a larger model, he does have some good detail. He doesn't have a lot of really minuscule detail, so he's a good model for a beginner. Even though, like I said, he's a tad expensive, but it's a very good beginner model. Plus, doing a slightly larger model helps you realize whether or not you could do something smaller like one of these up in the front here, or if you even like it. Alright, so I went around and did the black lines on Guamon now. I'm going to go and quick double check where I first started and see if I missed any spots. And then we'll move on to the next coat of red. When I did the base coat of this model, I used cocoa, which I may have said earlier, but I also mixed a little bit of texture paint into it, folk art textured finishes, to give it sort of the scales, sort of again, more texture, make it look like the scales have more of an armor look to them, like a natural armor sort of look. So if you were to look real close, you'd see little bumps that weren't there before necessarily, almost like a rhino hide. Okay. I'm actually going to paint a little bit on the inside of the mouth, a little black as well. I have a different color idea for that in a little bit, but that's what I'm going to do right now. And I'm actually going to do around the fangs in black right now also. At least the top row and the bottom row. I'll do the two side rows red, the two side fangs red. Keep in mind I'm just coloring the flesh part black and red right now. I'm not coloring the actual fangs or teeth. I have a brushed metal black for those in a little bit. Okay, so I have all my black spots on that done. I'm going to rinse off my brush, close up my black paint. I'm going to move to my next shade of red. It's a little bit, actually it's considerably brighter than the first shade. And at the end of the video, you can see all the paints that I used for this model. I'm going to start up at the top again, and I'm just going to dry brush over the red that's there. So you see both shades in different parts of the model. I'm doing it a little bit lighter than I was doing the first coat because I want to be able to see both colors, and like I said, or in some spots a blend of the two colors together. Clean up a little mistake I made. Got some red where I didn't want it to be. That's another thing about miniature painting. If you made a mistake or feel like you made a mistake, no one knows you made a mistake unless you tell them you made a mistake, because it's your model and you can paint it however you want to paint it. So I don't need to go over and double check that one because I got the red, all the spots that I wanted to be red I got with the first color. So this was just to create more color, different shades of red and blending. So I'm actually going to move on to the next shade of red because I did that so light that it should have dried almost immediately after applying it. Clean off my brush. we're going to move to the next shade of red, making sure first that all my other containers I already used are still closed, because we don't want to spill paint. It's probably tough for you to see on the camera there, but or on the screen, but this shade of red is just slightly lighter than the one that I just used, but there is a difference. It's another reason I like using products from Plaid. They have thousands of different shades, so you can just come up with all kinds of unique combinations. See, that one went a little heavy on. So I'm gonna get it wet, pat it down, like I did earlier. I actually forgot to add the red to the two side fangs. I'm going to do that right now. It's okay that it's slightly brighter, because I still have another shade of red to go over it, so it should still blend it okay. I'll just make it stand out a little bit more than the rest, which is fine. Alright, I'm going to let that dry for a moment. I rinse my brush. I applied that red a little bit thicker than the second coat in a few spots, so I'm gonna let that red dry before I add the final coat of red. So while that's drying, I'm gonna move on to the base of the model, and these are gonna be earth colors. For this one I used, as the base coat, I used the Painted Textures. It's got little specks in it to make it look like it adds dirt, and they also have moss and concrete colors as well. So I'm going to add a slightly lighter shade of brown than the original. Let me use that out of the way. Than the original color, base color. And again, same thing, light quick brushes, brush strokes. The things with rocks, you want to try to just flick the edges where there's a crease on a rock or a corner, because it helps create better shadows and wear. Some of you might be saying, oh, there's a huge white spot in the middle, but that's actually where the model is going to go, and it actually glues to that. So you want to avoid having paint on that as much as you can, because you want to have a clean seal with the super glue. And I actually use baking soda with super glue. It has a chemical reaction and creates a super bond, and I will show you that when I get to that stage. I'm going to close up this brown, rinse off my brush. Move to my next shade of brown. This one's slightly lighter. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go in all over light quick brush strokes. And I have two other shades of brown after this, and I'm going to use one on some stones, and I'll use the other one on other stones to create more unique looking stones. But my last shade is almost like a rusty sort of reddish brown, so that will add some color. And this is actually another one of those textured paints, so it'll add a little more dirt grain effect to it as well. And that's my base. You don't have to wear gloves, but I have to work today, so I wore gloves so I didn't have paint all over my hands. I'm actually gonna go over the black spots on this model again with a slightly smaller round detail brush. I don't know the exact, it's a number 1. I'm just gonna dab in a couple of spots where I want the black to be a little more solid. Yes, more solid. That's why some people don't actually like the dry brush style, because they think it's a little sloppier. But I think it adds more character to the model myself. Almost like I did with the rocks on the base. I'm trying to get it just on the edges so the edges stand out a little more than edges of the scales. If you can see what I'm doing there. Two sides done. I'm just going to do the back sides now. So now I'm gonna do a similar. I'm gonna actually go over the black now. Yeah, I'm actually gonna move this up here and set this in here so it sits. I'm going to rinse my brush, and then I'm gonna go over the black with a like I did with the red just now, but with a gray to define the edges a little bit more. And then we'll move on to the color shift. Actually, for this underbelly, you could probably use the larger brush, but I'm already almost done, so. Definitely if you were going to do multiple shades of a color on this underbelly part, I would use a larger flat brush than what I'm using right now. So, created a different effect than what I was originally going for. I'm leaving that for that, leaving that the way it is for now. I'm actually going to use black brushed metal to do all the fangs and spikes. And rather than putting it into a separate container, I'm just going to shake it up and use the cap. That way when I'm done, I can put the cap back on and I'm not wasting a bunch of paint somewhere. This stuff's pretty thick but also smooth, so I'm not necessarily going to dry brush, but I'm going to wipe excess off the brush. Now, if you wanted to get into some of these tighter spaces a little easier, you could paint all these parts separate before gluing the model together, but I had to glue it together ahead of time to save time and prep it. Another reason this is a good beginner model is because it doesn't have a lot of flash lines like you'll find on some other models. And I don't really have a good example to show you what a flash line is, but basically it's where the two parts of the seal of the mold fit together, and a little bit of excess plastic or metal, depending on what the model is made out of, will leave a thin line on the model, and you'll have to trim that off. But I've done a few of these now, and I've not really found any flash lines that needed to be trimmed. So. Another good reason to wear gloves, other than to keep your hands clean, is that it's a little easier to fix a smudge from a glove than it is to fix fingerprints afterward. I'm just double checking to make sure I got the metallic, the brushed metal in all the spots that I want it to be. I'm going to use blue flash color shift paint lightly over some of the red spots and in the mouth. And then I'll use some black color flash on some of the black spots and around some of the teeth. Thing with color flash paint, it's like it's almost like a liner or a wash. A little bit goes a long way to create the effect you're going for. I don't know if you can see the difference there. I'm going to keep going around the rest of the model that way to give it that iridescent sheen. The thing with blue flash is if you put it on too thick, it becomes very purpley. If you leave it light, well, it's still a little purpley, but not as bad. It's actually one of my favorite color shift colors. I believe there's 12 different shades if you're curious. Just take a very small amount to create that effect. The last color I'm going to use is the black flash color shift paint. Again, I'm just going to use a very small amount of that. And I'm just going over the black brushed metal on the fangs. So they still have the black metallic look, but they have a little bit of a gold shimmer to them also. So you can, if you look at it, depending on how you look at it, you can see both colors. I'm actually going to add a little bit inside to the inner teeth as well. Just going to sit that there for a moment, and then close up my container, clean my brush, and then we will glue that model together. Then after I let it sit for about an hour to make sure it's completely dry, I'm going to go over it again with the same Mod Podge Ultra. I'm going to brush it on to create a sealer that is pretty much impervious. So if someone splashes water on it or something, it'll wipe it up right away. It won't affect the paint at all. So first I'm gonna take my gloves off because I don't want to smudge any paint on there anywhere. Take these off. This is actually, so the 1/4 inch brush I would have used that doing the base coat to tuck in any corners and cracks that I might have missed with the foam brush. But I'm actually going to use it to apply baking soda right now. Sorry if I'm out of frame, I'm just trying to open that container. So baking soda, I keep in one of those little 50-cent gumball machine things. It keeps it from spilling everywhere. Like if you put it in a baggie, forget it, it's going to go everywhere. Or you apply any pressure to the baggie, it's going to pop. So I'm going to brush a little bit of baking soda around the base. We'll call it the stem. And it's okay if some of it falls on where we already painted, because once we glue the model together, we can just blow it off because it's not going to stick unless super glue gets on it. Lots of people seem to think you need to get really expensive super glue to make your model hold together, but really all you need is a little bit of baking soda and dollar store super glue. So we have the baking soda on there. It's not even super heavy. It's just a little bit of a coating. And the super glue, we're going to line. If you look, there's little grooves inside the model where they fit up together. And that's where we're going to put our super glue. In there, and all around the edge. Super glue comes in gel and liquid. I've tried both, and I've found that for these type of models and with using baking soda, it's better to use liquid super glue. Just if you're, make sure you have a grown-up help you do this. If you're not a grown-up. So actually, I'm gonna just tap off any excess baking soda, and I'm going to put them together and make sure they're right the way that I want them to be, because this would be very, I'll just hold it like that. And that's my painting video.